The Prime Minister will join other Pacific leaders this week, jetting into the tiny nation of Tuvalu as it battles severe climate threats. But Jacinda Ardern is likely to face fewer awkward conversations than her Australian counterpart, Scott Morrison, as they face the heat from leaders of low-lying atolls over carbon dioxide emissions. As Australia races to catch up with New Zealand's Pacific reset, Fiji's Prime Minister Frank Bainimarama says Australia's reliance on coal poses an existential threat to Pacific Islands. But it won't be the only awkward item on the agenda, as Chinese officials touch down for meetings in a country that has diplomatic relations with Taiwan. RNZ Pacific's Jamie Tahana is in Funafuti and filed this report.
Sunday's normally a quiet day for church here in Tuvalu, where there's little noise apart from bells and singing. There was that this weekend, but there was also a frenetic energy outside the newly built convention centre, where finishing touches were hurriedly being done ahead of the forum's start on Tuesday. It's a mammoth task for Tuvalu, population 11,000, its capital, Funafuti, a slither of an atoll just south of the equator. But Prime Minister Inele Sopoaga expects they'll be ready.
I think we have a big job to do this week, and the job is to review where we are, where do we want to go to, and how are we going to get there.
The main issue for Tuvalu at this forum will be climate change. The country's on the front line of it, its highest point 4 metres high, its narrowest point not much more. Thursday's leaders' retreat, which will include New Zealand's Jacinda Ardern and Australia's Scott Morrison, will be hosted not far from the causeway, which is regularly washed over by high tides, in view of a coast being nibbled by the sea. The forum's Secretary-General, Dame Meg Taylor, says serious questions will have to be answered and bold commitments made.
I think that we're at a real crossroads in terms of the impact of climate in this region, and our leaders know that, of course, and they will speak to it. Many of our Prime Ministers and Presidents have spoken out very strongly. When you think of the future, you've got to think seriously, what kind of a future are we leaving?
And that's likely to bring some heat on Ms Ardern and mostly Mr Morrison. Australia's been in the firing line of several Pacific leaders in recent months. At a recent meeting in Fiji, leaders called for an end to coal and for it to avoid trying to water down climate commitments, as happened at last year's forum. Australia is in the midst of its Pacific step-up, like New Zealand's reset. But Mr Sopoaga says that's meaningless without climate action.
Regardless of how much money you do in the step-up policy, it doesn't mean anything. Why? Because you are helping to have serious implications on your own people who are living in Tuvalu, Kiribati. I think we need to bring these people connections more visible to the leaders.
But Mr Morrison and large delegations from the US, China, Britain, Europe and nearly everywhere else will be here trying to swing their geopolitical concerns. For Australia and the US, security is their big pitch as part of their geopolitical tussle with China. Tuvalu is also one of the few states that still recognises Taiwan, and both Beijing and Taipei are here and could cause a stir. Also back is Fiji's Prime Minister, Frank Bainimarama, for his first forum in 12 years. Fiji was suspended after the constitution was abrogated in 2009, but after it was returned, he refused to come, critical of Australia and New Zealand's outsized influence. But what does all this hubbub in Funafuti mean for the hordes of locals who come to greet every plane that buzzes in? Escaping the searing equatorial heat in a hammock on Sunday afternoon was 14-year-old Sungale Koveu. What did she want?
I hope they will take them with them when they're back home. Remembering of the forum, especially for the children's future.
We'll know whether that's the case by the end of the week. In Funafuti, ko Jamie Tahana tēnei.